If there's one thing we've learned in the past few months, it's that learning is about connecting at a human level. And what Names Not Numbers enables our students to do is to connect at that level and learn in ways that they cannot learn any other way. You can open up any book about the Shoah, and there are many. But to connect with a survivor of the Shoah and people who helped people survive the Shoah is an experience that cannot be replicated. We're so grateful to Names Not Numbers organization. I'm thankful to Mrs. Lisa Guggenheimer, to Rabbi Jacobus for all the work that they did to help make this program happen. Thank you for being a part of it, and I hope that you enjoyed this program as much as our students did.
It seems like ages ago that you concluded your interviews with your survivors. I couldn't have been more proud of you then, and I could not be more proud of you now. Your experience of hearing the first-hand account of survivors will undoubtedly shape who you are. We miss you, and we're so proud of who you have become. A special thank you to Mrs. Lisa Guggenheimer for coordinating the Names Not Numbers program and making sure that every last detail was perfect. Looking forward to a memorable evening.
The heroic souls who survived the horrors of the Holocaust, Jews and righteous among the nations, who so generously shared their very intimate, painful, and profoundly important stories with us, exemplify what it means to be virtuous, noble individuals. But as importantly, they must be seen as individuals who are models of virtue and nobility for all humanity. It is only as a result of their resolve to survive a virulent form of persecution that was intended to ensure that they didn't survive, and the remarkable courage it took to create rich and fulfilling lives after the Holocaust, are we able to document their experiences which are, in fact, our history. We honor you in our solemn obligation to carry your stories and your messages forward to all who will listen. This was my 5th year coordinating the Names Not Numbers program, a program that strives to educate the world about a horrific time in our history by sharing the stories of the survivors themselves. With each story I hear, I grow increasingly more passionate about how crucial it is to continue telling the stories of the Holocaust, our collective story. This mission is of the utmost importance to me as a Jew, but it is just as significant to me as an educator of children, guiding students through the learning process about a crucial time in the narrative of our people and having them create such profound intergenerational documentaries is an honor. First and foremost, I would like to thank Rabbi Dr. Jeffrey Kobrin, Mr. Ophir Segal, and Rabbi Adam Makobis for providing me this invaluable opportunity. We were fortunate to be able to rely on the well-known author and journalist Dan Paisner to teach our students critical interviewing techniques and skills, Michael Puro for invaluable lessons in the areas of cinematography and documentary filmmaking, and Brandon Pro for his vision in creating a powerful and provocative artistic experience, which you are about to see. I would be remiss if I did not mention and thank Tova Rosenberg, the program's creator, and the many generous families who helped underwrite the cost of the program. It is my honor to represent the North Shore Hebrew Academy in this incredibly important project. I would also like to thank my colleagues and the entire staff of the North Shore Hebrew Academy Middle School. And last, but definitely not least, I would like to thank my family for always being there. Both the students and I are forever grateful to the survivors and righteous among the nations, Assemblyman Anthony Durso, Rachel Epstein, Joseph Hecht, Werner Reich, and Renee Zoroff, all of them extraordinary human beings. Because of their fortitude, their willingness to share the fullness of their experiences, both horrific and wondrous, and their trust in us, is the world now going to have knowledge of the atrocities they witnessed and experienced. They each hold a special place in our hearts as they continue to convey their message of tolerance and solidarity with the world. To the students, I must say how incredibly proud I am of the dedication, responsibility, and attentiveness that each of you exhibited from the very first day that we embarked on this effort. You approached every step of the process with levels of maturity and commitment well beyond your years.
Tell me a fact and I'll learn. Tell me a truth and I'll believe. But tell me a story and it will live in my heart forever. The Names Not Numbers Oral History Film Documentary Project is remembering the stories of the Holocaust and is telling the story of the Holocaust for the world to hear, for the world to learn, and to inspire future generations to combat anti-Semitism and all forms of hatred and intolerance. This unique project is in its 16th year. Over 2,500 survivors and 6,000 students have participated in it worldwide. The students were instructed by teachers and professionals. They learned interviewing techniques from journalists. They learned filming techniques and editing skills from documentary filmmakers. The students interviewed, filmed, and edited the 2-hour interviews with each survivor to make 20-minute oral histories that are compiled in the Names Not Numbers documentary at the school. You're about to view the documentary Names Not Numbers, a movie in the making. This film chronicles the students as they are being trained by the professionals and includes their reflections. In it is embedded approximately 10 minutes from each interview. This is the students' work. They're filmed and edited interviews. Through this project, our students are preserving history, and they are the witnesses to the witnesses. The pasuk starts out, Zachor Yemot Olam, remember the days of old. The word that is always associated with the Holocaust is the word Zachor, remember. So that's what you're doing. You're making a documentary to remember what happened to the Jewish people during the Holocaust. But how are you doing this documentary? Sha'al avicha v'yagedcha. Ask your fathers and they will tell you. So you are interviewing your survivors. You are asking the questions that you want to ask them, and you are filming your interviews and making the documentary.
So I want you to take the opportunity now to think about it, to give it some thought, because being part of the Names Not Numbers project and interviewing survivors makes you a living matzeva. It makes you a living monument. You're a living testament to the story of these survivors.
Today we had the opening of the Names Not Numbers program.
And we watched a video of one of the survivors' stories to kind of introduce us to what we're going to be doing.
When I was watching the film, it was really emotional for me because she was so young and how she went through this at such a young age, it must have been so difficult.
It's important for our generation to do Names Not Numbers because I feel like our children will want to know about this and we'll be the ones that have to tell them.
We're really the last generation who's going to be able to hear Holocaust survivors tell their stories. So this is probably the only time I'll ever get this experience.
I chose to do Names Not Numbers because it's always important to learn about what happened in the past, because history is doomed to repeat itself.
If you don't know about what happened, then it could happen again.
Right now there are many people in the world who maybe don't know what happened or don't know about the Holocaust, and there are even people who think that the Holocaust never happened.
I think it's important because it happened to people just like me, like little girls my age, even younger.
When you're reading a book, you can't tell their emotions as clearly and you can't ask questions. So I think
it's better to hear the story firsthand.
For example, like I could read a book about a famous athlete that I really wanted to meet, but at the same time, like it's much cooler to meet them face to face and actually be able to see them in person.
When someone goes through something so horrible, sometimes you need to hear it from them to have a stronger impact and to encourage people to learn more about it so that it won't happen again.
So before I start, I want to, first of all, congratulate all of you for volunteering to do this. It's a pretty noble enterprise. It's really an honor to be able to help share the stories of our survivors. So my job really is to help you feel a little bit more comfortable about the task in front of you, to give you a little bit of insight from my experience interviewing all these different people and figuring out the best way to pull their stories from them and make them feel comfortable in your presence.
Today we had an author who came to speak to us about how to interview people, and one tip I learned was to engage in conversation with the person that you're interviewing and not just keep asking them closed-ended questions.
He helped us understand better how to speak to them like they're just regular people. It's a regular conversation, just trying to gain more knowledge about what they went through during the Holocaust.
When you're interviewing, you should pay close attention to what they're saying.
So try to keep that in mind when you're talking to them. They were kids once, and the experiences they're describing to you they're sharing memories that they had from their childhood. So that's a very powerful way that you can connect with them.
When you're just interviewing the person, you never use a yes or no question.
It's important to ask how they felt, not just what happened.
We're trying to get the truth out of the survivor, not just basic little details, really the full detail and full story.
But be prepared to be surprised, be prepared to be devastated, but be professional and engaging and be delightful young people, and you'll find that there are wonders to be gotten from these folks that are giving of their time in this way. But again, you guys are really to be applauded for going down this path. I know it seems difficult, but it will be very rewarding to you, and try not to freak out about the weight of what it is that you're going to hear these people share.
We went to the Museum of Jewish Heritage, and we were able to see literal objects that had gone through the Holocaust.
So we're going to do a little bit of a warm-up exercise first, then you're going to do the tour, then we'll come back here, and then we're going to do a workshop after that.
We went to the museum, and I learned a lot more about the Holocaust than I knew. And
I never realized how many things there were left from the concentration camps.
The thing that touched me the most were the Jewish artifacts like sidors and talit that were destroyed in the Holocaust. It's just unbelievable, because how could you live in a society where there's no order? They just took people, made them objects, and just made them slaves, and just decided to kill them just because they're Jews.
These are photographs of artifacts that were used or reflect somehow Jewish resistance. Your task for the next 5 minutes or so is to try to figure out what these artifacts are and how they represent Jewish resistance.
We had a workshop, and one of the things that stuck with me was the milk jug that they found where the Warsaw Ghetto was located, even though all seemed to be going wrong. Nothing was in their favor. They still had hope that maybe one day there'll be someone who could help them, or maybe one day they'll get through with it.
I think it's crazy that some people this young had to go through something like hiding and this horrible thing when people even younger than me had to go through it, and they probably didn't understand.
They didn't have the childhood that I got to get. They got traumatized as a kid. They learned how to act a different way, how to behave. They were barely even able to talk. They didn't get fed the right way, and I can't imagine life like that.
Today we learned how to use a camera.
We're gonna learn the camera today, we're gonna learn the audio today. This is the camera you guys are gonna use. We don't have a lot of time on set. We need to be able to communicate. you have to understand what a medium shot is, what a close-up shot is. The medium shot is what did we say? It's around here to here. That's your medium shot.
So I learned a lot of filming tips, like how to do the angles on the camera, how to focus it, how to make the brightness better, how to do the microphones.
We learned how you have to zoom in when they're crying because it's more important.
And how to control the volume with decibels, and how to make a film as moving as possible.
Names, not numbers, Matt, scene 1.
Names, not numbers, scene 1.
Come on out.
Scene
Come
2.
on out.
And scene 1.
Action.
Today, I prepared for the interview by practicing questions and going back and forth, interviewing each other. I got more background information. We prepared questions with my groups. We thought of questions that we would want to hear the answers to. We would want to learn about them.
I practice interviewing with my group.
Our group prepared for this interview by asking each other questions and getting ready for any emotions that come with her answers.
I prepared by looking over my questions and making sure I was able to pronounce the places that I had to ask questions about.
I went over Joseph Hecht's bio and studied about his life.
My great-grandfather, Joseph Hecht, is going to be interviewed for this project. It's definitely going to be a lot easier since I've spoken to him a lot before, but at the same time, it's going to be hard because this is going to be a side of him that I haven't really seen a lot before.
I feel nervous because I don't know how he's going to react to telling his story over again. He might get a little emotional.
I'm feeling nervous because I've never done something like this before.
I'm feeling very nervous, but also very excited because I read so much about this person. He sounds such an amazing person, so I want to meet him and get to know him more.
I want to learn how Renee survived during the Holocaust.
I feel excited and I feel very nervous because I don't know what he's going to be like in person.
My name is Renee Zoroff. I was born in Poland, August 1936. My father was a businessman in Poland, actually very successful because we had, these were small towns in Poland and the telephones were coming into town. My parents had the number 2 number. It was number 2 because my father was the second wealthiest man in town. Very lovely family. My dad, he was strong, loving, caring, well-educated. So was my mom. I grew up, I had 2 maids in Poland. So, we were well off. My father was an observant Jewish man, businessman, but observant. I would say he would call himself Mizrahi. It was very comfortable. People had a good lifestyle. Family was around. They would observe Shabbat. My sister was born at that time. My sister was 3 years younger than I.
My name is Joseph Hecht. I was born in Ruskova, Romania. I was born in 1927. My family was my father, my mother. I have two sisters. We were 5 siblings. I had a grandmother, step-grandmother even around the corner for me. My grandparents lived a few miles away. I had aunts and uncles. They're close by, in a walking distance. My parents was like we would call here a trucking, whole, like a trucking business, but not a truck, but a horse and wagon. But non-Jews, we had no problem. No problem. We had Ukraine neighbors. We got along. And we made the best of everything. We tried to.
My name is Rachel EPSTEIN. I was born in France. The town was Saint-Quentin. I was born in 1932. We didn't stay in that city very long. We moved in a town named Compiègne, and my father had a business clothing for children, and he also was a tailor. So I was going to an all-girls school, and it was called Jeanne d'Arc. It was very, very nice, very close to my home, and no problem.
I was born in 1939. I was born in Italy, in a town south of Rome, north of Naples, right in between, on the old famous Roman roads called the Appian Way. I think during the war might have been maybe 12 to 14,000 people, included those neighborhoods disjointed by the town. We call it frazione, that means a fraction of the town. My parents are mostly small farmers. I'm one of 8 children. I'm the only member of my family that has more than 5 years of education. I went to school for 5 years. Then I went to middle school. I'm the only one that went to middle school of the family.
My name is Werner Reich. I was born in Germany, Berlin, Germany. I was born on October 1st, 1927. My father was a mechanical and an electrical engineer. He worked for Siemens in Germany. And in 1933, various laws came out which stopped him from working. So because my father couldn't earn a living, and because we couldn't go to school, my sister and I, my father and mother, we left Germany in 1933. Well, we were a typical middle-class family. Although we were Jewish, we were not observant. I went to school with children who were Catholics, who were Protestant, Muslims, Greek Orthodox, Serbian Orthodox. So we were friends of all different faiths, and I never encountered any anti-Semitism. After Germany invaded Yugoslavia in 1941, and I went to school, and one of the teachers made an anti-Semitic remark to me, but that was the first time in my life I ever encountered anti-Semitism.
Well, the experiences came with Hitler, with the Holocaust. First, the Russians came, actually, and they nationalized our property. The Russians were communists, and anybody in business was an enemy of the nation, of the people. So they took away everything. They call it akcja in Polish. When they started, when we had to start running, they put us into a ghetto. Every town, the Jews were herded together. So many families lived in one apartment. So we all realized, and we also knew to be very quiet. Also, I had to have the Jewish star on my arm, and it said Jude, meaning Jew. That was in my grandparents' hometown, which was called Buchach. And we were there, and the Germans came in, and they made an edict that all young professional and businessmen should come to the town square for a meeting. And my grandfather, who was very wise, he said to his sons not to dare show up because they're going to be massacred. So the sons listened, and they didn't go. But the ones who did show up in the town square were killed. We heard the noise of the guns, boo, 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 like that. They were all executed in the town square. So the Germans felt once they got rid of the leadership of the town, it'll be much easier for them to get rid of all the other people. All the Jews hated them. They were feared tremendously. They were cruel. And they couldn't have done that without the Polish and Ukrainian collaborators, because the Germans didn't really know the Jews, but the Poles and the Ukrainians did know them. And they would tell the Germans, that's a Jew, this one is a Jew, this one is, and that's how they knew.
I was outside on the street, and I saw the gendarme, that was like a police, escort a rabbi from the next town. And then we realized what happened. I went into the house and I told my parents, I saw the rabbi from that town, they arrested him. And that was the beginning of Nazism by us. They did nothing to react. We just had to obey what they said and what they told us to do. 2-3 days later, they got together and they told all the Jewish people to gather their valuables and come to the shul. And from there, we went to the ghetto. The ghetto was about 15, 16 kilometers from us. We stayed there for about 3.5 to 4 weeks. In the ghetto, my whole family. We had 6, 8, 10, 12 people in a room because that's the way it worked out. Nobody bothered us. We had food, and we had. The ghetto was about 15 kilometers from us, so we didn't have any problems in the ghetto until they took us out. The street where we stayed was the last transport, the first transport to leave, and they took us into the railroad, and they put us into the wagons. We put us into the wagons. After we left the ghetto, they said, take your most of the valuables that you have. We didn't realize what's what.
And in 1941, Germany invaded Yugoslavia, and then all different types of restrictions came. You had to wear a yellow star in the front and in the back of your clothing. So as you walked on the street, people pushed you, and sometimes they threw garbage at you. If there was a German soldier on the sidewalk, you had to step into the gutter. You couldn't be on the same sidewalk with him. And my mother was afraid that something would happen to me. So she placed me with one couple who were working for the resistance, and my sister with another couple. I was hiding. I couldn't wear shoes because the people in the apartment below would hear me. And one of the biggest tasks that I did was I was developing films for the resistance movement. I was making enlargements and pictures. Very limited understanding of what was going on. I knew that they were after Jews, but I certainly didn't know that they were killing Jews. I was at that time 13 years old. I was a kid, a child, and suddenly all this was interrupted, and I was responsible for myself in a way.
And after the couple months, no Jews are allowed to have business. So my father then couldn't find a job, and people didn't want to talk to you. So the only job he could find, it was digging trenches. The Germans, they knew what they were doing. Slowly and slowly, they did that. So after that, Jews cannot have radio. You have to turn into your radio. Jews, if the woman has a fur coat, she has to turn in the fur coat. She cannot wear a leather coat. She cannot wear this. If you go in a bus, you have to go all the way in the back. If you go in a park, you have to sit on certain benches. It's reserved only for Jews, where nobody could see you. Jews had to wear the Jewish star. Jews have to, on their ration cards, they had a big stamp in red, Jew. Everything to try to get us down.
and the Americans trying to liberate us from the Nazis, came, and September the 8th, 1943, was a nighttime. They launched flares, and thousands and thousands of leaflets saying that leave the town, run over the mountains because we're going to bomb it. These are the Americans. We had to evacuate the town. My parents thought that the bombing will last only 4 days, like it lasted in Naples, but it lasted 9 months. It was the two families, the Sinigalia, these Italian Jews, and the Ascarelli. The Ascarelli had no children. Sinigalia had 4 or 5. And my father used to be a colono. Colono means like a caretaker. He'll take care of the village, take care of the farm. So now, when we are instructed to leave, what do? You live two defenseless families alone? So we didn't have to hesitate. We just took with us, we refugees, we left. You know, for a while, we brought a lot of stuff, although we very carefully rationed. But after that, it was very, very difficult. Not only my father, my brother, my uncle, they helped. My oldest brother was 14 at the time. I was 5. Not only protect them from the Nazi threat, not only protect them from the refugees. The mountains were full of refugees from the towns, and they would turn the Jews in just like that because they could exert money from the Nazis if you turn the Jews in. And also, how do you provide food for 4 families? So another time, my brother, my uncle, were going to the mountains, try to get food, and with our donkeys. And my brother sometimes used to go alone, and always a soldier, a Nazi, will come and will say, come and see here, come here. And he didn't want my brother because he was too young to send him to war, with the Germans. But wanted a donkey because they would transport some war materials over the mountains. There's no roads. So my brother had a little knife. He'll stick in a donkey's derriere in the back, and the donkey would go in the woods and wait for my brother. And he got away for a long time. One day he was going with my uncle. Now there's a German soldier came with a rifle. And so my brother pulled the same shtick, you just stuck the donkey left. Now the German wanted to know from my uncle, my brother, where the donkey is, because this time, not only he wanted a donkey, but he wanted my uncle also, so they could take him to Germany and do whatever they wanted to do. So my uncle said, follow me. And he brought up right on the top of the cliff. He said, it's down there, take a look. He went to look and he went. And people say, he killed? Yeah, because if he didn't kill him, they would have killed my brother, my uncle, and my donkey. That's how bad it was.
We ended up being in a ghetto in Kolomea. That's also in Poland. Every day there would be death all around. And the fear not to be one of them. But when we were in the ghetto in Kolomea, the Jewish people, of course, in the ghetto, made up schools for the children. So we'd be singing and playing games. They would organize this. Zug nicht keinmal als du gehst den langen Weg, something like that. Never say that you're going, den letzten Weg. Never say that you're walking the last walk, because the time will come when things will be good for you and you'll be alive and happy. And it's a Yiddish song. And they used to say, Zug nicht keinmal als du gehst den letzten Weg. And I'm not singing very well, but that's what was sung, different Yiddish songs. That's when I started learning Yiddish, because we basically spoke Polish. But in the ghetto, we learned Yiddish. There would be these gatherings of Jews called akcja. In English, it's action. And the Germans would decide there would be a roundup of the Jews to be killed. some of the Poles were very good to the Jews, and they were friendly, not that many, but some. And they would tell when the akcja would be happening. So we went into hiding, and the Jewish engineers were very clever, and they built hiding places which you would not believe, in back of ovens with hidden doors. 100 people could hide, but they was all hidden and very well constructed, and that's where we'd go, into hiding. And the kids were told not a sound could be heard because we heard the rummaging upstairs, the boots and the screaming, and look for the Jews. And so we knew to just keep our mouth totally shut. There was no question. If a child would start crying, they would put a pillow over the child's face because there would be 100 people hiding, and they couldn't take a chance. Then they liquidated the ghettos. They said anybody in the ghetto would be taken to Auschwitz. So somehow, miraculously, my father was able to get us out by bribing certain people. So we got out of the ghetto, and that we were hiding in the woods and in the fields. I remember in tobacco fields. That was a gruesome story. We had no place to go. And tobacco leaves are very huge. I don't know if you've ever seen them. So it was in the summer, it was very hot. And we were hiding in a tobacco field with the big leaves protecting us from the sun. Then nighttime came, and we heard screaming and shouting. These were the Ukrainians who went looking for Jewish blood. They somehow found out that the Jews would be hiding in those fields, and the Jews would maybe have some jewelry or money on them. So they started chopping heads, slaughtering. And my parents, my mother grabbed my sister, my father grabbed me, and we're running, just running blindly. And as we ran, we saw dead bodies littering the walkways. I mean, not much walkway in the fields. And we just ran for our life, ran into the woods, and we were able to get away. There were many such occasions.
My parents came from Poland, so they were Polish Jews. So in my town, they say on January 19, 1942, they say no, they had to be arrested. So they came, and the French police, and this was police, the gendarmes, that knew my parents very well because my father was in business. He had gotten friendly with that police. Well, that day they came to arrest them. The policemen, they really, like they didn't even know my parents. They were very brutal. The cops were really so, hurry up, you know. And there was a very big commotion. So the people, there was a Gentile family that lived on the bottom of us. They came up and they said, what's going on? So my father said to them, and those are people we hardly knew. So my father said to them, I don't know, they came to arrest us. They want us down the town hall. My brother was 5 and I was 10, and we left all by ourselves. So this Gentile couple says, don't worry, Monsieur, Madame Almed, we'll take care of your children till you come back. You'll come back and you'll find your children just the way you gave us. They're just the way they are now. And I understand we were told my father was going on through the streets, screaming, pulling out his hair out of his head and saying, what did we do? What's going to happen to my children? And so forth. And from there, they were shipped to Auschwitz, yeah. So the rest of my family also, I have lost about over 30 members of aunts and uncles and cousins. And you just have to remember those people were very young. My mother was only 29 years old, and my father was in very early 30s. And that was it. I never heard anything from that time.
One morning at about 6 o'clock in the morning, there was a knock at the door. And the husband opened the door, and about 6 secret German Gestapo agents came in there, the German secret police. Then they took me down in a car and took me to the local headquarters of the German secret police, of the Gestapo. You know, I was so naive, so stupid, so uneducated, uninformed, if you will, that I firmly believed that they're going to let me go because I really didn't do anything. One day, I looked out of the window into the prison yard, and I saw a bunch of prisoners walking around, and there was my mother was there as well. And she was walking around, and that's the last time I saw her. She got killed somewhere. And next morning, we were loaded into a regular railroad car, and we traveled them for a couple of days in that car. And when they opened the door, we found ourselves in Czechoslovakia, found ourselves in Theresienstadt, which was another concentration camp. The camp had been established really as an exhibition camp to prove to the Swiss and Swedish authorities that the Germans are treating Jewish prisoners as prisoners of war, that they're adhering to the Geneva Convention. But the overcrowding was a problem, so they solved it by simply loading people into railroad cars and shipping them to Auschwitz and killing them. They must have had another inspection or so, because I and 2,500 other people were loaded into railroad cars, and they put in a bucket in each cattle car. And then suddenly, you know, we were blocked in, and they closed the door, and we traveled for roughly 3 days.
50 families, 30 families, about 100 people in a freight car. No toilet, no water, and no light, no nothing.
That bucket overflowed within an hour. You know, you have about 100 people in a cattle car, and people were lying on the ground, and you couldn't step anywhere. You stepped over people in the dark. It's the first time I ever saw a dead body, you know, when I was lying there. And just next to me, there was a woman who died, you know, so it was a very rough awakening, if you will.
But the older people know already, we're going to Poland, we're going to hell. And as we passed into Poland, the first stop was Auschwitz. We got into Auschwitz and opened up the wagons, the doors from the trains, and everybody out.
We were unloaded, and we were directed into a camp area. Men went in one direction, the women in the other direction.
He took us, me, my father, and my brother on one side, and my mother with siblings on the other side. We wanted to go with them. We wanted to stick together. He says, yeah, you want to stick together? Exact words. You go with them, you're going to be burning, because we saw the fire there. You're going to be burning there in 15, 20 minutes. You saw the smell, you didn't know what it is. You couldn't imagine, you couldn't think that they're burning people like that. That was the end of the family, to see the family together.
Then there were men standing there with razors, cutting your hair, and they painted some Lysol or something on it. It was extremely painful, because they were all scratching, scratches from the razors.
He gave us a bundle of clothes, a pair of pants, those stripe uniform, a jacket, a pair of shoes with wooden soles.
One man picked up your arm and then he put a tattoo on your arm. And all this went extremely fast.
Everybody rolled up the sleeves and he says, as of this minute, you respond to A4723. And that is my number on my arm.
That was that. We were in Auschwitz. And it took me about 3 weeks until it actually sank into my mind that, yes, we're gonna go through that chimney. That was real. That wasn't a stupid joke. And we thought it was a stupid joke. And you suddenly became very, very lonely there. In daytime, there were people around, you talked and you messed around. There was very little work which had to be done. But at night, when you were lying in the bunks, you felt like a rat trapped, and there was no way of getting out of it. In the morning, we had some brown water which was made out of acorns, with roasted acorns, and we got a slice of bread made out of flour and sawdust. People calculated that we got roughly 400 calories a day. Dr. Mengele came into our camp, and he commanded all the young people, all the young boys, to strip naked and to run past him. And it was selection time. That's what they called selection. And as we ran past him, occasionally he nodded his head or he moved his hand and somebody went to the other side. We were trying to look taller and stronger and healthier, happier, you name it, anything that we could possibly muster. And it's during that time that I was close to a nervous breakdown because I was running for my life. I knew it. And you never, ever want to run for your life. Trust me.
They loaded us up on a freight car and took us to a labor camp, Lagisha. That's in Poland. In Lagisha was hell because the guards were young guards, as I said before, and they had no mercy. To shoot at somebody, or kill at somebody, or shoot them, there was no yes or no. Do it, and it's done. That's the way. I recall one incident. A guard, the guards are staying outside, and they told somebody to take a stick and dig it into the ground. And then he told them to pull it out with the teeth. He couldn't pull it out. He could shoot them from there, and he killed them. I was in Lagisha, I would say about 2.5, 3 months. The food they give you every day. Every in the morning, supposedly give you coffee, and at lunch, they give you a soup. In the morning, they gave you a piece of bread, and you ate it up. You didn't keep it for later. Because later somebody's going to get a hold of it or something. You ate it. I personally ate it up right away in the morning. After Lachish, as I said before, we went to Buna. We were in Buna till January the 18th. I remember exactly the date. And then they evacuated the camp. We were lined up to march. Then they said, everybody go back to the barracks, and they'll give you a portion of bread. I left my father in the line to march. I said, I'm going to go to bring this portion of bread. By the time I came back, my father was gone. And that was the last time I saw him.
We were just at anybody's mercy. Not only did we hide in the woods, we were hiding in attics. We were hiding, I remember a brewery actually. My father was able to get us up to the roof, and he dislodged some bricks, and we got inside the attic, and we survived there too. I was walking with my parents, my sister, and we had nothing to eat, nothing at all. And my father found some, the leftover of the apple on the ground. It was all dried up, and he made me eat it because he said, it's food, it'll keep you alive, it's vitamins. Eventually, my father found a co-worker of his. He was a worker, a lady, a woman who worked for my father. And she took us in, and this is how it was. She had a barn, and in the barn, she had a cow, a horse, some pigs, animals, okay? And it was just a barn, and outside the barn, there was a hole for potatoes, pictured like a table, as big as a table. She emptied out that hole for us, and she had my parents, my sister and me live in that hole. We actually lived in that potato hole about 1.5 years. That hole, and it was very tiny, and when the animals urinated in the barn, it went into the potato hole because the hole was underneath the barn. So you can imagine the lifestyle that we had. And my father would leave that potato hole every night to go look for food, to ask some of the Christians that he knew in the neighborhood for food, and he would give them money. We used to have jewelry, which was kept in the hems of our coats. What do you do in a potato hole? You have nothing, and it's all dark and horrible. She took a stick, and the floor, the ground, was just rough earth. And she took a stick, and she taught me the alphabet. She taught me math. She would teach me every day something.
This wonderful Gentile family that lived in the building where we lived. They lived right underneath us. They took us in, and they went above and beyond what anybody could do. They had 2 sons of their own. They knew that everybody would tell them, Monsieur, Madame Riboulot, what are you doing? You're taking in Jewish children. You could get killed. Your children could get killed. So here we went in, 2 young children. They were working people. Everybody worked. We didn't know anything about working. And in the morning, before I went to school, we ate, and everything was established on a system. I had to wash dishes. I've never washed a dish before. But anyway, I had to, when you come from school, she would tell me you have to go down and bring up potatoes and peel potatoes. What does it mean, peel potatoes? I was a Jewish child. I didn't do that with my parents. This wonderful family took out food from their own children's mouth to give to us. But we were more or less, we were hidden in the open, like. It was, you used to see German walking around, the Gestapo were walking around all over the place. We were always afraid, and Nobody talked to one another too much. All those things are happening. You don't even know why it's happening, because you're Jew. Okay, so because I was a Jew, and all those horrible things happening, your mother and father being torn away from you and all that, I don't want to be a Jew. I really don't want to be a Jew. Don't mention the word Jew in front of me. If this family had wanted to convert us, I wanted to go to church. I wanted to do everything that went against a Jew. And they say like this, your parents left us 2 Jewish children, and when they come back, this is what they're going to find, 2 Jewish children.
Easter Sunday, 1944. Easter is the most religious holiday in the Roman Catholic faith. The only thing my brother could find for us to chew on was 2 ears from the donkeys. There's nothing in there. But even then, we don't have much for the families. We always made sure that there was another family not far from us, just as many kids, that had even less than us. We always tried to share.
$60,000 of us were given a small piece of bread, and we started on a death march because the Russians were advancing. And we walked, and then it was bitter cold. It was temperature were way below freezing.
March overnight, 2 nights, I don't recall exactly. And then that first night, from Buna we left, we lost, I would say, 15 to 20% of the people. It was raining, it was wet snow, it was miserable.
And we were loaded into open railroad cars. We had no fat on ourselves. We had very thin clothing. The temperature was cold. We had no food in our stomachs.
I didn't think anything and I didn't feel anything. I just was hoping the day could by. It's one thing I had in my mind, never give up. I'll try the best until I can. I was on the floor, but don't give up. Get up and march.
Eventually we arrived in Mauthausen, which was a concentration camp from hell. By this time, most of the people on the train were dead. We got out of the railroad car and I couldn't walk. I thought my feet were gone. It was the most painful experience I ever had in my entire life, because all of us were frostbitten. And some people died on the spot. They just keeled over. And my feet started to rot after a couple of days. And there was a Serbian doctor in the camp, and he cut off my toes on one foot and part of the toes on the other foot. And that's how he saved my life. I was there from January till the end of May. I was liberated the 5th of May, 1945.
So we were in the east, in Poland, and the Russians liberated us in 1945. And that was a wonderful, happy, happy day. First, we heard all kinds of aircraft above us. And my dad would say, This is the Russians are coming, the Americans are coming, the planes were getting rid of the Germans. And then finally we realized the Germans were gone. And we left that hole in the ground and we could barely walk. After you're in a hole, not using your legs for anything, you're like a cripple. But we managed, we walked. And we were walking through the woods to our hometown, which was Skala. And we were so happy. That feeling stays with me. And the four of us survived at that time, my sister too. We're free, we're out here. We can see the sky, we can hear the birds. It was wonderful. The Germans and the Russians started fighting on the front. That's where they were fighting, shooting at each other. Okay, we ran away from our home. We ran with the Russians to get away from the Germans. The Germans were coming back. Just picture it, we're liberated, we're free, they're back. So we ran away on a Russian truck. The truck stopped at the front and they started shooting. And this is gonna be a very sad part, very sad. And I sat next to my mother on the truck. My sister sat on my mother's lap because she was the baby. And my dad next to my mom. And they were shooting, and you hear the bo constant. And then the Germans threw a hand grenade onto the Russian truck. And I'll never forget that. And the hand grenade, a splinter went through my mother's hair down into my sister's heart. And she was killed instantly. She was 4 at that time, and I was 7. And the only thing we had from her were her little shoes, and they were blood-stained. And my father buried my sister in the hard ground of Poland near Russia. It was March, the earth was frozen, and one of the Russians gave him a shovel, and he was able to dig a hole and bury my sister and say the Kaddish for my sister.
We were hiding, okay? But very early in the morning, from outside in the street, we heard steps, we heard people walking. One of their sons went out. He said, I got to go and see what's going on in the street. He went out, and the Americans were coming, were passing the street. Well, I ran out of that house. I went and I kissed his boots. I lay down in the Jeep and I kissed his boots. And they were throwing out cans of sardines. They were throwing out cans of tuna fish, chocolate bars, candy, chewing gum.
The French brought the Moroccans because Morocco was a colony of France. They were fierce mountain fighters. They're supposed to help us to kick the Germans out of Italy. But they were bad people. So every time we hear some noises coming down, the women would just speak outside. And if you see there were the Moroccans, they sort of locked themselves in. So one morning, they heard this noise coming down. So the women were going out. Somebody said, no, they're the Moroccans. So the lady said, no, they're not the Moroccans, they're white. So they were the Americans that were coming down to liberate us. Now, it was such a difference.
And we were liberated by American forces. But they didn't know what to do. They had only military rations, K rations, and they fed us these rations, and about 20,000 people died eating them. I ate a can of chewing tobacco. I didn't know what it was. But to me, anything that could be chewed was food. There wasn't a blade of grass in the camp. There was nothing.
I was liberated in 1945, April 23rd. upstairs, up on the attic, it was straw, hay, so you covered yourself into the hay. In the morning, you got up and opened up the door to start marching again. They were shooting. They were shooting at us. There was American soldiers. They didn't know who was there, what. For a fact, I have a friend here. He got shot in his leg. Mendel Tessler. He got shot in his leg for days and days. I was looking for him. One day I found him in a hospital. But I was wandering around. I didn't know where I was. I was wandering like a zombie. Who was? I would say my grandparents must have 50, 60 grandchildren. I was the only survivor. I was in DP camp for quite a few months. I went home to my hometown, and I came into Budapest, Hungary. I met a neighbor of ours, the Uncle Fishman. He says, "Where are you going? There's nobody home, nobody from your family home." I didn't step into the house, because I knew nobody was alive.
After liberation, I hitchhiked back to Yugoslavia. I had no relatives in Yugoslavia. I had no friends. My mother was dead. My father was dead. My sister was somewhere in Italy. And so I had nothing. I had nobody. I had an uncle in England, and he wrote to me that I should come to England. I started working as a laborer in a factory, then as a machine tool fitter, then as a tool and die maker. I got married and I came to the United States.
I had one aunt and one uncle that survived, that we didn't know about it, okay? And so we were there for 2 years with them. And then my uncle discovered that he had a sister that lives in America, in Brooklyn. So he came to her and he said to her, he asked her, and he says, "I have a young girl, she's 16 years old. Is it possible for you to take her?" And I came to this country against my wishes. Because I had to leave my brother behind.
I was in the DP camp. My father had a sister and a brother in America. So that's how they made up papers. That's how I came to America. The boat ride was rough. It was in January. An army boat, about 600-700 people, a small boat. We arrived here on Christmas Eve. We got on the deck, we see the lights, the whole city, something that we never saw before. So see the Statue of Liberty. Here's I'm in a free country now, and let's see what's going to happen.
I came to America when I was 14 years old, and a new language, a new environment, new everything. It took a long time for the voyage. We came to America in November of 1950. When I saw the Statue of Liberty, I was crying. I just felt so good coming here. It was the haven of freedom. That's what it was.
I recall stepping out of the boat onto the deck, and there in front of me was the Statue of Liberty. Huge. It didn't mean much to me at that time. I wasn't dreaming of the Statue of Liberty either. My sister was here in the United States, and I was looking forward to getting reunited with her after all these years.
And I always looked to see how I could come to the United States, because I heard good things about the United States and the opportunities. And I waited until I became of age. I was able to obtain a visa, come here, and made this my home. Within 3 days, I was in school at night. And for the first 10 years, I did all the nice jobs reserved for the immigrants, like washing dishes, cleaning cesspools, working in furniture factories. Altogether, spent 16 years in night school, while my wife was raising a family of 4 all by herself. Every day, I thank God. I really do. I'm not exaggerating that I came to the United States and to the sign of my cross.
How was it possible for you to hold on to your faith?
Your faith? Yeah. Don't ask me that. I can never answer. You have tried, you have tried. I made a few interviews like this. So the rabbis asked me, do you still believe in God after all that? I look at him and I have no answer for him.
Most people who went through the Holocaust, they say, you know, how can there be a God who permits something like this to happen? That's a fairly legitimate question. I say that God gave us guidance, told us not to murder, gave us instructions. It's for us to listen. It's not for God to do the stuff for us. It's for us to listen. It's like your parents. Your parents tell you, don't cross the street. You know, it's for you to listen to.
Let me talk about the question of why for yourselves, because this may test your own emunah. It may test your own faith. And I'm going to tell you the story of my friend, Rabbi J.J. Schachter. J.J.'s father was Rabbi Herschel Schachter, okay? And it had a picture of him leading the first prayer service in Buchenwald after the liberation. So Rabbi Schachter told his son that when he stood at the lectern to lead that prayer service, in the back of the shul, hundreds of people in the shul, is a survivor. And before he could start with the single tefillah, the survivor yells at him, "Rabbi, which God do you want me to daven to? The God who killed my mother or the God who killed my sister? The God who killed my son or the God who killed my daughter? Which God?" And there's a shocked silence in this historic shul. Rabbi Schachter didn't say a word. He slowly walked down from the bimah. He slowly, without saying a word, walks to the back of the tent that was serving as a shul, and he starts crying hysterically, and he hugs the survivor who challenged him. And for 15 minutes, they cried nonstop together. As he cried, the survivor started to cry. And then he went back and started the davening, okay? That man later told him, "I was convinced I was never going to be observant. I was convinced that I had it with the God who could allow such horror in the world. But it was through those tears and through that hug of that rabbi that I regained my faith."
It went well, and I shouldn't have been nervous because it worked out great. He had a very interesting story, and he went through a lot, but he survived, and that's what matters. I thought that not a lot of other people would be able to do what she did.
It's a really special experience to be able to hear the story from a survivor who was actually there.
I feel very emotional after hearing her story because it's a very sensitive topic for her to share.
I've learned that the Holocaust is not black and white. There's a whole spectrum of stories.
It's important to me that I learn about the Holocaust because part of my family went through it.
This is our family. The Jewish people are our family.
Let's say you weren't connected to the Holocaust directly. Your cousins or your friends and your family are all connected to the Holocaust. Like they lost people, and that means you lost people too.
Although there's a lot of bad things happening today, there's a lot of bad things that happened before, that nothing could stop like us as Jews. And no matter what happens, there'll always be like good people that will stand together.
The title of Names Not Numbers means to me that we should identify people by their names and their stories and not by a number that was given to them.
Everybody is a person and everybody deserves to be treated like a person. Nobody's greater than someone else.
We want to show that these people are people, not things.
I think doing a project like Names Not Numbers is so important to teach people around the world what has been done to the Jews.
I think that Names Not Numbers is a really good opportunity for people to learn from the people who lived it, what happened during the Holocaust.
I hope to pass this knowledge on to my children.
I hope to share it with people that aren't educated about it.
I want to pass it on to coming generations that might not be able to hear it directly from her.
After we hear their stories, we tell them to other people and they pass it on to other people.
If we don't hear their stories, we can't tell them to future generations and their stories will just be forgotten.
So me doing Names Not Numbers, I feel like is making just a tiny difference.
The message to generation, never, never, never give up. Just make your mind up for something. You want to be a street cleaner, you want to be what? Just don't give up. Go for it and you'll make it.
My message to future generations is that you should always follow your dreams and never give up.
Her story was very special, how like so much things happened to her family and to her, and then she kept on trying and she never gave up.
Never give up and always be hopeful for the future.
Keep your spirit, remember you're Jewish, make your people proud, your family, the Jewish people, achieve, accomplish, have a good, big heart.
We should always be grateful for what we have and to appreciate the little things because like not everyone has it that way.
Stay lovely and stay Jewish and don't be afraid, don't be ashamed to be Jewish. It's beautiful to be Jewish and always stand up for yourself.
We could learn that people need to speak up when something like this happens or need to defend other people instead of just sitting there and not doing anything about it.
It is not okay for the world to be silent. People really have to speak up. It is not acceptable for them to just stand around and do nothing. They really have to speak up for anti-Semitism.
If somebody needs help, no matter who they are, you have to help someone because we're all people in this world, and if we don't help each other, then who's gonna help us?
We can learn from the silence that we also have to educate the people who are silent so that they know how to do something when something like this happens.
Learn. Make sure you analyze what you hear. Depends who you hear it from. That you yourself are the protector of the Jewish lives in the future, the Jewish existence. Instill in people sense of responsibility that we have toward one another, that when things happen, we should run and help out.
I don't think anybody said it better than the late Dr. Martin Luther King when he said, in the end, we will not remember the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends. And he was right. I can't remember what Hitler, Goering, or Goebbels said, but I remember the silence when we asked various countries to let us in, to give us the opportunity to flee. And they said no, they said nothing. So don't be a bystander. It's our responsibility as Jews, as human beings, to help others.